So the Oscar nominations have officially been released for the 2024 ceremony this year. It's making big talk, big waves, big news on the internet. It's a hot talking point. Specifically the Barbie, whether or not it was snubbed or not, and all that kind of stuff. And it's that time of year again where personally, I find film fans become really annoying. Please don't be insulted. I mean, like in general. I don't mean anyone specifically. Just in general, the discourse around the Oscars has been kind of frustrating, kind of annoying, especially in the last, I don't know, few years. And maybe that's because I've gotten older and they've always been like that. But at least to me in particular, Oscar discourse and that kind of side of the industry is something that it is frustrating on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm pretty unaffected by it, so it doesn't impact me personally. But when I see all these voices online, I see a lot of people very upset with very strong opinions, and I can't help be affected by that. And I guess the solution it would just be to walk away from the computer and go outside. So I guess I'm part of the problem now. So sorry. But it's that time of the year again where I think it's good to for us at Doomed Productions. I think most people who follow us are pretty aware of our stance on the Oscars and awards and the film industry and all that sort of thing. But if you aren't, this is a good time for us to just clarify and bring those things up again because I think there's interesting and good conversations to be had around the Oscars. But frankly, they're not being had by the major critics, major filmmakers. There's not a lot of interesting discourse, I think, around the Oscars in particular. And I think first and foremost, here at Doom Productions, should let you know we're not fans of the Oscars. Now, we don't hate it, but we don't love it. We're kind of indifferent. We think there's a lot of problems with it, and a lot of those problems outweigh the positives of the Oscars. Now, this is coming from people who are outside of the industry. This is coming from people who primarily make low budget to no budget movies, very, very small. And it's one of those things where, again, it doesn't really impact us on a personal level. This is more or less as our perspective is as filmmakers who work in a tiny little pond compared to the big ocean that is Hollywood, and film fans because we like movies too here. And I'm not gonna tear any movies down. So if you clicked on the thumbnail hoping for some spicy hot takes or anything, like I mean maybe this is a big hot take, I don't know, but you're not gonna hear me trash any of the nominations because I just don't believe in trash talking other filmmakers or their movies, quite honestly. But first and foremost, at Doom Productions, we're kind of indifferent about the whole Oscars thing, and we believe art is a subjective medium, and so just on principle, the idea of an award show claiming that one movie was objectively the best movie of the year is kind of crazy and ridiculous to us. That's not to say that, what the Oscars, I guess, should be isn't like a bad idea. So, what the Oscars, I think, should be, in my opinion, is a celebration of movies and achievements. I think that in my ideal world, like if I could control the Oscars, what I would probably do is I would, similar to how they do it now, have everybody in the Academy nominate the movies that they liked, that they thought their peers did really well, that they, for one reason or other, just enjoyed and had a good time with and thought were particularly outstanding. It shouldn't be any different than any other awards that goes on in other fields like teachers or doctors or lawyers or all the fields. I know, I mean, it's not as extravagant or as big as the Oscars, but I don't think I think, those other industries have awards given out. The Oscars should be no different because it's just peers and people within the industry saying, "Hey, my buddy Chris did a great job with Oppenheimer. I thought him and his team did a really good job. I'm gonna nominate him for directing, or I'm gonna choose him for directing and stuff like that." I should also state I don't know exactly how the voting process works. I have an idea based on what people have said, like directors and stuff and critics, but I don't know the specifics. But in my ideal world, it is peers nominating their peers, saying, "Hey, that dude or that person did an outstanding job, so I'd like to recognize their talent for that year." That's what I think it should be, the voting process. And then what I think the award show should be is again a celebration of the movies. It shouldn't be longer. On one hand, I'm torn. On one hand, I don't think it should be longer than an actual movie, but on the other hand, I think if you made it longer and if you took out all the fluff, all the presenter, the jokes, the bits, even some of the songs, like I think if you take all that out, what I would be really interested to see is industry professionals who've been awarded this trophy, this accomplishment for their work that they did for that year. And I would love to see them give 5 to 10 minute speeches, tell them beforehand. Like the winners wouldn't be announced at the ceremony in my ideal version of the Oscars. They would be told via email like the week before or something. And they could come to the award show with a little speech or a little thing, that they could share, whether it be a story, a speech, a little bit of advice. I think film appreciators and I think filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, and just their friends and family would really appreciate seeing their this person win an award and talk about what they're thinking in that moment, what they've been thinking about in that week since hearing the news, and talking about what advice they'd give to other people, the other people that helped them on their journey, and really just have it be a collection of speeches and organized so people who win can organize their thoughts and share what they'd like to share. Because what usually ends up happening is they went off the name, they go to the stage, and they don't have any time. So really, the speeches are just, "I'd like to thank so and so, so and so, so and so," and it's just a list of names, and then the music starts, and they don't really have anything meaningful or profound to say other than these are the people who helped me, and they read off the names, and sometimes we recognize the names, sometimes we don't. But I think I'd be more interested in that version of the Oscars than what the Oscars actually are, because usually what they end up being is popularity contests, right? So the movies that are nominated, there's a whole ad campaign aspect, political aspect of it, which again, I don't totally understand 1000% what goes into all that, but I know that it's a very, like, you have to campaign, you have to pay a lot of money for that sort of thing. And I guess that's kind of unavoidable when there's votes taken into account. But they're in years past, Oscar voters have talked about that they would nominate a movie that they haven't seen yet, or they would not vote for something just because they haven't seen it. And the voting process seems like it is skewed or there's some holes in it, which sounds very bad to say. And I'm not trying to say that any movie that has one doesn't deserve it. I'm not trying to suggest that at all. But merely what I'm trying to say is when I watch these award shows, I get the vibe that there's an aspect of a popularity contest, which again, you know, I don't care what wins. I don't care if Barbie wins or loses or Oppenheimer or whatever. Um, but it would be nice as someone, if I were to watch the Oscars, it'd be nice to know that, it was people taking their time and care voting for these sort of things. And I guess that's kind of impossible to do, but that's just something I'd like to see. But these these ceremonies though, they become these unnecessary displays of just Hollywood wealth, of these rich elites giving each other trophies and patting themselves on the back, and it's it's much more about the show than the awards, I feel like. And it's much more about the show than the movies. And again, I think if they were going to improve the Oscars, I would make it so the movies and the people who worked on them are first and foremost, rather than this kind of Hollywood extravagant spectacle, and something that is just another award show. Because by this point, really, what's the difference between the Oscars and the Golden Globes and the Emmys and the all the other award shows. I mean, yes, technically some of them are for different mediums, but really, what's the difference? And ultimately, because I mean, I believe that art is subjective, and I think most people would agree with that. I mean, if you don't, it's another conversation. But what do these awards? These awards don't really mean anything in terms of the movies themselves. Now, again, within the industry, they can help or hurt someone's career, winning or losing an Oscar, that sort of thing. But um, in terms of like the broad scale, like in terms of in 50 years from now, will this award really matter? And I don't know. I don't think so. So I don't see the Oscars being too different than any other award show, quite frankly. And a huge problem that I think the Oscars has, aside from just the concept itself, awarding movies, is they pretend to celebrate movies. That's the thing. They pretend to celebrate the movies, but they really just try to make it entertaining for everyone who's watching at home. People who just like celebrities or people who just like a certain actor or actress or whoever. And they try to make it entertaining. So even if you didn't see any of the movies this year, you still want to watch the show. And so usually what ends up happening is that they kind of fail at both ends. It's usually not very entertaining, in my opinion, and it's usually not really celebrating movies. So they don't please anybody, I feel, from my perspective. Now, of course, I'm also in my little bubble, so if you enjoy the Oscars, please let me know the reasons why down below. I would love to actually hear perspective from someone who has a different view on the Oscars as me. But again, I just don't find a lot of value in the Oscars as a film fan or as a filmmaker. And I guess for from the film fan aspect of it, being someone who likes the movies and doesn't really watch the Oscars, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but it reminds me of this quote. Now, I've talked about this quote on our channel before, and it's been a while, and maybe I haven't actually, but it's not this quote. It's this tweet from Josh Trank, who directed Chronicle and was it Legend? Was it? It was the Tom Hardy Al Capone movie. I can't remember what it was named. Uh, and he tweeted out this years ago, but I saved it because I loved it because I loved just kind of the ideas behind it. And he said, ranked lists on movie sites continue to seed young film fans with fascist energy, making them grow up to ridicule art, have unintentionally arbitrary taste patterns, and closed minds while feeding an algorithm that closes doors to anything different or challenging. And I just love that quote. I love it. I would get that tattooed on my body if I could, but I think that'd be a little much. And I think it's true. I think ranked movie lists and I think award shows contribute to this mentality of objectivism. How do you say that? That the idea that art can be objective, the idea that there is such a thing as a great movie or a horrible movie, which frankly just isn't true. Because for every movie that you hate, there's someone out there who really loves it. And for every movie that you love, there's going to be one person out there who thinks that it's terrible, quite frankly. You can't please everybody. Everybody's different. So there's no way to objectively measure how good or bad a movie is. And so these ranked lists contribute to this lie that there is such a thing as a great movie or a bad movie. And these Oscar nominations and these awards, they allow these people, I mean, they seem to exist for people to affirm this idea that this movie's better than that movie or that movie sucks. You know, you'll hear it all the time, particularly in interviews or podcasts or videos made by primarily not film people, but sometimes with film people too. There's a lot of film people who fall into this kind of trap, but they'll say something like, now I don't agree with this, you know, but they'll talk about, like, for instance, Lord of the Rings, and they say, oh, it was incredible. It got nominated for 11 Oscars, Return of the King, and it won them all. It was incredible. Compare that to The Hobbit. It didn't win any Oscars. That just proves to you that those movies weren't good. Now, again, if you know this channel and you know us, I actually really enjoy the Hobbit movies. I think they're pretty fun movies. I think they're good movies. And Lord of the Rings. Um, But they'll use the Oscars as this kind of standard for if it doesn't win an Oscar, it's not good. Or if it's not nominated, it's not good. And there are tons of movies that have never been nominated for Oscars that are incredible, absolutely amazing. The Shining is considered to be one of the best horror movies of all time. It's one of my favorite horror movies, and it was nominated for Razzies. Shelley Duvall was nominated for a Razzie. Isn't that like that's insane to think about? And so, just the Oscars and this mentality that a lot of film people have, and filmmakers and film fans, it's just another way to tear movies down. And I'm not about that. I'm not a fan of unnecessary negativity. Criticism and feedback, that's another thing, that's another topic for another day. But I mean, I quite often I feel like the Oscars is just another log to put on the fire that is this terrible discourse around films in general these days. It's on the fire with Twitter and Letterboxd and all these other aspects that go into it. That the idea could be great, but I think more often than not, the Oscars just have a huge problem with contributing to that kind of mentality where you look at movies cynically, you look at it with a cinema sins type lens where you're arbitrarily saying that's bad because it did X, or that's bad because it did Y, or that's good because it did X, or that's good because it does Y. When at the end of the day, it's just an opinion. It's just your opinion that matters. And a movie will make you feel a certain way, and you'll either like it and you won't. And you'll come up with reasons, you'll come up with evidence to support your argument, or I guess your reasons for feeling a certain way about a movie. There is no right or wrong when it comes to art or movies. And so that's kind of from a film fan perspective. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that if you care about what other people think about movies, or I guess a better way to say it is if you care about if your opinion on a movie is influenced by critics or other film people, I mean, I that just that seems incredibly sad that you can't just watch a movie for yourself and come up with your own opinions. I'm not saying don't listen to other people. I mean, I talk to Ethan and Zach all the time about movies. We share our opinions and thoughts about movies all the time. But there's a difference between, that, forming your own opinions and having a good discussion with friends about movies, as opposed to watching a movie and going on to Letterboxd or IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes and being like, oh, everybody hated it, so therefore I'm going to hate it, or everybody loved it, therefore I'm going to love it. Um, or seeing those reviews ahead of time and going into a movie with the preconceived notion that like, this movie's going to suck, so I'm going to look for reasons why it sucks, or this movie's going to be really good, I'm going to look for reasons why this movie's better than everything. And I think that's just a terrible way to watch movies. Quite honestly, you should just watch a movie regardless of what people say and regardless of people's opinions, and just form your own thoughts. Now, that's my opinions on the Oscars as a film fan, as someone who enjoys movies. Now, as a filmmaker, you know, again, if the speeches were longer, if they allowed the filmmakers and the technicians to actually talk about their craft and talk about, the steps that led them to that point to winning an award, or the work or what inspires them, I think that would be very valuable as a filmmaker. But it's not that. It's just people reading off names typically. And so as a filmmaker, I can sit down and for 3 hours and watch Hollywood rich people give awards to each other and give each other trophies and pat each other on the back, and that's all fun and good, and it can be entertaining. I'm not saying it's like boring, sometimes it can be entertaining. But as a filmmaker, what I've been doing for the past few years, which a lot of filmmakers have been doing for the past few years, is I've taken the time during the time that the Oscars have been aired, like 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that, whenever it is, I've gotten together with my friends and I've made a movie with my friends. And that is a lot more fun. That is a lot more productive because rather than sit down again and watch people give each other unnecessary trophies, these Hollywood rich elites, um, it's it's a way to be creative and play and use those skills and create something. because if anything important happens during the Oscars, it's okay. You'll see the highlights the next day. You'll see it on TikTok and YouTube and all that. But what's really fun and the memories that I truly cherish are making movies with my friends, because that's what you do when you're a filmmaker. You make stuff, and there's no better way to make a movie than with people you love and care about. And so the first year, Ethan and I and Caleb and Nathan, we got together, we made a movie called Crescendo, totally improvised, and that was super fun and exciting. And so did a lot of other people. This was a part of the Joel Haver Oscar Challenge. Joel's a friend of our channel. He's a fellow filmmaker. He was a big reason of why Ethan and I started making feature films, because he proved to us that it is possible. And he started this challenge in to encourage others to make feature films. And it didn't have to be this crazy, unobtainable thing. It could be this very simple thing that you just do in a couple hours with your friends. And so we did that the first year. And last year we did it again. We made, what was it called? Dude, Where's My Mountain Dew? Now it didn't end up being a feature length film, but it was a tight little comedic improvised little short, which was a lot of fun to do. And I don't know what we're gonna do this year, but I can imagine that Ethan and I will get together with friends again and we'll make a movie that night. It's always a really fun time, and I think that at the end of the day is a lot more fun and a lot more productive than sitting down and watching the Oscars, which is kind of sad, quite frankly, because I would love to be able to get really into the Oscars, and it was fun to watch the Oscars back in the day. But again, maybe it's just age, and just as I've grown older, like I care less about the awards shows and it's not as entertaining anymore. And it's just really fun to get together with friends and create something. That's kind of what I've been thinking about since these Oscar nominations have come out. And I'm all for, celebrating movies. I think that's really cool. But I'm even more excited to make a movie, make a project with some friends during the Oscars this year. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to that. So I don't know if that's the take you were looking for when you clicked on this video. I don't know what the thumbnail looks like as of now. I would imagine it probably has Barbie or Oppenheimer in the thumbnail. So if you clicked on this hoping that I would talk about the Barbie snubs or the overhyped Oppenheimer stuff, like, sorry, that's not kind of what I talk. That's not really what I talk about here on the channel. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about the last few days as the Oscar nominations have come out. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Oscars in general? I would love to hear people who love the Oscars talk about in the description. I'd love to hear other people why they don't care for the Oscars as much down below too. I'd be really interested to hear what those folks have to say. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on the Oscars, please leave a comment down below. And I'm also gonna put a link in the description, or maybe here. Um, there were hundreds of movies that were made last year during Joel's Oscar challenge and the year before, all combined. And there's some really good stuff in there. Some great films that were made all in the same time, which is even more incredible. So check out those movies. Maybe in the next few weeks or so, Ethan, Zach, and I can sit down and we can try to watch some and talk about some movies that not many people have seen in that list. But yeah, I it's an exciting time regardless whether you hate the Oscars or love the Oscars. This time period of the award season, so to speak, there's opportunity here for good discourse, and I would love to see more of it. But it's usually boils down to people just tearing apart movies, which it's not as interesting to me. But thank you for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, subscribe, like this video, share it around with friends, and I will see you at the next one.